Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about lower saturated fat ketogenic diets, because that's a topic that people have repeatedly asked about in the last few videos I did on this. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skill at my crafting a little bit. Let's talk about this. What you're generally going to find is that that sort of diet is going to have a lower diet adherence. It's going to be very, very difficult to follow, mainly because the only way you're going to do that without adding tons of N6 fats is to drink olive oil. You're going to have to pour olive oil on everything. Alright, in that version of ketogenic diet, you've got to step back and ask, why are you doing it other than the satiety effects? There are no health benefits to these ketogenic diets outside of the calorie deficit they create. They're inferior for gaining muscle, they're inferior for athletic performance. So the only reason people are doing these diets is what? To maintain a caloric deficit, to keep their calories lower. Because again, I want to state, there are no health benefits that have ever been found to these diets once you get out of the caloric deficit. And every diet with a calorie deficit gives you the exact same benefits of the ketogenic diet as far as health markers go. They all do, even diets that are total opposites. Alright, even diets that are 70-80% carbs have similar impact on fasting glucose, similar impact on cholesterol levels, everything else. Right, that's normal. In fact, usually the cholesterol goes down even more. So, what's going on here? Well, someone linked a study, and they're like, well, this is proof they're safe in the long term, this sort of diet. And it was a lower saturated fat ketogenic diet. I'll link that study below for you guys. But if you look at the study, here's some problems. This wasn't a long-term study because these people never returned to maintenance calories. Meaning, are you going to stay in a calorie deficit your entire time you're on this sort of diet? And furthermore, people who are really relatively lean using these to get ripped, your weight loss is going to slow very, very fast. Alright, when you're doing studies like this, these people had relatively rapid weight loss the entire 24 weeks of the study. Now keep in mind, that's not the same as putting someone on one of these diets for 3 years, 5 years, and testing their blood work. These people were losing weight the entire time, and that's the take-home message. Anytime you are losing body fat and the scale is going down significantly, all your lipid profiles look pretty. They always look pretty. Your fasting glucose always looks pretty. When the weight loss stalls or slows, that's when you start getting a better indication of what's going on with the diet. And that's something you've got to keep in mind. Their blood work is typical of a person who's losing weight quickly, irrespective of if they're eating table sugar, irrespective of how much protein they're eating, irrespective of their fat to carb ratios. That kind of goes out the window for the short term. And still 24 weeks is still relatively short term. I don't see how they're calling that long term, other than a lot of people do fad diets for 6 weeks and they're done with it. But look at the breakdown of the diet, and there's some things to consider. Alright, the diet consisted of essentially 500-ish calories of non-fat. Right, and we don't have their total calories listed anywhere. But assuming they're around 1,800, because we saw relatively rapid weight loss in these obese people. These people were weighing approximately 220, sedentary, didn't exercise, so it's not like they're muscular 220 here. These are people who probably needed to be 130 to 160 pounds, the men and women. So they lost weight relatively quickly. Again, probably due to a calorie deficit. Again, ketogenic diets are good for that. And they're pointing out they added polyunsaturated and unsaturated fats. So basically, if you assume they're on around 1,800 calories, let me break out my calculator here. 1,800 calories, 1,300 of which was fat. And they're saying it was 20% saturated fat. Well, you're going to struggle to find fat sources, real high fat source foods that are 20% saturated fat. Alright, that's not very common. You'd be surprised how quickly even peanut butter can push you over the safe saturated fat intake. It's not just red meat. It's not just meat that's the source or dairy that's the source. Alright, times 20%, about 260 calories from saturated fat. We divide that by 9, approximately 28 to 29 grams. It's recommended that you do not exceed about 30 grams. At 30 grams of saturated fat is usually about the safe limit for men. You don't want to go over that, and usually closer to 20 for women. Right? So these people were skirting the edge, but again, without adding oils and being very, very picky with your food, you're not going to do a ketogenic diet for any significant period of time, where you maintain that without them giving you a very, very specific prescription and adding oils into your diet, you're basically going to have to dump olive oil on your food, on everything. Because if you were to do the breakdown, start looking at steak. Steak is usually, and I'm a big fan of red meat in moderation. I eat red meat 2 or 3 times a week. I'm from Texas. I eat leaner cuts. But steak is usually around 40% saturated fat. So they couldn't get more than about half of their fat calories from red meat. I start looking at eggs, we run into the same problem. So basically, if you're getting 1,000 calories of fat from steak, 1,000 calories from steak fat, eggs, things like that, you're getting over 40 grams of saturated fat. We're now falling into the area where we are exceeding recommended limits. And that's only 1,000 calories of your fat. All right. In other words, these people aren't eating steak and eggs. All right. These people aren't sitting around eating ribeye and eggs all day, because that wouldn't give them the numbers that they're looking for. So when you think of what most people do as a ketogenic diet, it's not working. So when you see guys like Brandon Carter making a 10-egg omelet, and throwing cheese on top of it, that's not a low saturated fat one. Furthermore, if you're adding oils, adding polyunsaturated fats actually has its own set of health problems. It has its own set of inflammatory markers in your arteries and everything else. All right, so you shouldn't be adding omega-6 fats to anything you eat. We get way more omega-6 fats than you need for perfect health, even from eating chicken. All right, in other words, a person who's eating chicken probably gets enough omega-6 fats to meet all their health needs. That's it. That's all you need. If you're eating a little bit of grains, you're getting enough. All right, oatmeal and chicken can provide all the essential fatty acids in terms of the omega-6 that you need. Consuming large amounts of polyunsaturated fats have their own health risks, and that's both omega-3 and omega-6. What you're essentially left with is the benign fat, monounsaturated, things like olive oil, avocados, macadamia nuts. That's where you're going to get foods that are very high in those and very low in everything else. So again, it's actually relatively difficult to do a ketogenic diet and keep saturated fat low. Your food selections are going to change dramatically. In other words, you're not going to eat a bunch of eggs with cheese on top of it, okay? That's not going to work. You're going to end up pushing your saturated fat to 40 or 50 grams or more a day very, very quickly. So the issue you've got is that you have one little study like that, but yeah, they were all losing weight. For people who are trying to do this to cut 5 or 10 pounds of body fat over several months, let's say you're a lean person, let's say you're 15% body fat. You go to use this sort of diet and you're losing weight very, very slowly, you're not going to see the shifts in blood work that these morbidly obese people saw. All right? You're not going to see the sort of shift in blood work. And you notice that as their weight loss stalled, the LDL drop started tapering if you look at the study. And what will eventually happen when the weight normalizes, because again, relatively high saturated fat, and they start eating a little bit more, the LDL will probably start going back up. And in the case of people who are following the more traditional ketogenic diet, particularly once they've reached roughly a maintenance weight and they stay there, every single one of them, when they get blood work done, go read any of the keto forums, all of them have high LDL cholesterol, and that's our concern. And that isn't something that they're all going to say, oh, there's more than one type. That is not what the research is showing. That's not what the experts are saying. That's what the ketogenic people are saying. That's not what the top cardiologists are saying. You better understand the difference. You better understand the difference. And these are cardiologists who see patients all the time. They're up to speed with the data. I've watched debates among physicians over all this research who've even said that, look, this whole idea of trying to break this down is silly. You're going to hurt yourself using that sort of mentality. You need to stick with what we do have data on, and we know that all LDL, when it's elevated, is potentially problematic. Some is worse than others, but elevated LDL in general, just in general, seems to be a problem. It doesn't matter that one is worse than another. Well, the problem is that even the ones that are the worst, people on keto diets are oftentimes, even Brandon Carter, are eating foods that elevate the one that even the ketogenic people say, well, that's probably more of the problem. They're dumping cheese on everything. All right, dumping cheese on everything, and then you're going to come back and then talk about Good, benign versus bad LDL. Come on. Go look at the research of which food sources elevate the worst type the most. It's absolutely absurd. But the problem with the low polyunsaturated, or the low saturated fat one, it's going to be hard to follow. Essentially, you're going to get sick of drinking olive oil. You're going to get sick of drinking olive oil, and then it comes back to the question of why exactly are you doing the diet again? Like, what is it that you hope to gain? 100% of the health benefits come from the fat loss. And if you're lifting weights and you're athletic, you're going to end up with better performance if you drop the ketogenic diet completely and run a more balanced diet. These diets are being used for people who have insulin resistance and who are morbidly obese. They're not good cutting diets for people who are athletic, who aren't using steroids to maintain muscle mass, who lift weights, and who are relatively strong and active and athletic. This is not even close to the best sort of weight loss diet. So you've got to step back and ask the question, okay, if you've got to do a heavily modified version of it, you're going to have to consume certain foods and not even do the foods that people seem to do the ketogenic diets because they love eating. You're not going to be sitting around eating 2 pounds of steak every day. We start running into problems here. You're losing the fun factor of the diet because you're drowning everything in olive oil. You're not getting any health benefits. It's just that you're not getting the big LDL spike because you're consuming really low saturated fat. Okay, but what's the point? You've got to ask, why are you even doing it at this point? It starts to become a hard diet to follow at that point. It becomes, it kind of defeats the entire purpose. So I just don't get it. I don't understand why people are even wondering or trying to do this. Like, what is it that you hope to actually obtain by doing this that you couldn't get and do better with a more balanced diet instead of something so extreme? Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.